So one friend just simply wanted to know: have you read Carl Jung's? So he's asked Black Book, Red Book, Gnostic something. I can't read my own writing. But yeah, I think he just wanted to know how much of Carl Jung are you familiar with, pretty much, or like what have you? What have you read on him?
It's been a while since I've read any of the source material. I don't think I've read the entirety of those books specifically.
I've heard it's quite dense stuff. Like it's sort of. It's like really rich chocolate cake, isn't it? It's like you got to really chew it, sort of thing. Like it's
the same with a lot of the philosophers I've absorbed. I've gone to the source material sometimes, but I almost prefer not synopses. That's one way to put it, but commentary. I like to read other people's commentary because the way I approach a lot of these things is not that reading the source material in that manner is bad. I think it's actually good, and I should probably revisit and pick up some things that I haven't read in a while or for the first time. But very often what I find myself doing is when I do read that material, I have thoughts about it, and I don't know if they're valid critiques or not while I'm reading it. And so what I prefer to do is go to someone else who's referencing that material and giving their understanding of it and their critique of it at the same time. So that's what I've tended to do over the years is go to, say, critics of someone who isn't. In more of
that kind of makes sense. Like I do the same thing with a lot of I seem to just be endlessly interested in almost everything. Like there's not much I come across in life that I go, oh, that's boring. Like I always find something in it that's interesting. And I find I do the same with a lot of things. I'll go to not the source material, but if the critique or the
commentary
analysis that I do, the commentary that I do listen to, I find intriguing, or I feel like requires more sort of investigation, then I will go to the source material.
Yeah.
Whether it be like a paper, like a science experiment in whatever field it is. Like if I feel like if it piques my interest, essentially, I'll dig further. But I find it's time saving, if anything, just to get at least like someone else's take on it. Because if they're just like, well, this guy's a complete crank, and you're kind of like, well, I've heard that he's actually got some, there's some kernels of truth in what he says or something. It may cause me just out of curiosity to go like, well, I don't believe you. I'm actually going to check for myself now. Whereas other times I'll be like, okay, this sounds like on the face of it, fair sort of analysis. Like, so I'll either take that as good enough. Like I'm not actually interested in digging further, or I find that across like almost every subject. I try and I think it's a time saving thing. Surely, like it's saving you the time of like this is sort of weird, and it sounds kind of wrong, I guess. But like people have people in their lives for purposes, type of thing. And I find I have people in my life for certain purposes. So like I've got one mate that's really into Shakespeare. I despised Shakespeare like most normal people because I had to do it at school, and I hated it. Like the fact that you actually have to, it's almost like learning another language and all the layers of meaning and all this sort of stuff. And I just found it exhausting and uninteresting as a teenager. So I paid no attention. But now, like later in life, and especially I guess with someone who can explain it well, I've come to appreciate it more. But okay, interesting.
Just to bookend that as well. So I found it's, in my estimation, a bit of a life hack to streamline that process on a couple of levels. One is that a lot of times, let's say if you get someone who's a very balanced commentator, they will say, here's the things that seem to make sense and that jive with what other people have said in this broad, and here's the things I think are a little sketchy. That's one way to do it. And then another way is to go with someone who's a pure critic, who thinks it's all shit, because they won't mention any of the stuff that they can't attack. They will only attack the stuff they think is sketchy. So that's almost also one way of saying, okay, so all that other stuff you couldn't find a problem with. Fair enough. That gives it's kind of a validation by the negative of, oh, you left all that out, so you didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't find a problem with it. But then also you want to take those critiques seriously, and to varying different degrees of good faith, depending on who you're listening to. But because that's what I want to know more than anything. I'm like, okay, if this guy said all this stuff, what's the stuff that makes the least sense, that seems to make the most assumptions? Where does the logic fall apart?
Yeah.
And that's where I get with the philosophers too, is you want to
where are the shark jumps?
You want to you want to find the people who were not a fan of their work and try to pick out whether their arguments make sense about the source material. And then you got to compare it to this, in some ways you got to go, wait a minute, did they even read that right? Did they quote anything? Was that really what that guy said? And then you got to dig deeper too. But that's, long story short.
Well, I think as I've heard you say, I couldn't tell you which episode, but in one of the episodes you said, there's so many different interpretations for just even the word water. Like there's so much you could pull out of just one word that, like, it does sort of make you think, like, is their take on this right, or is this just what they see? And if I look into it, I'm going to actually read something completely different. Like, because if something is like super open for interpretation, that makes me always curious as to, like, or would I just read it and read the same, like, out of it? Like, it's interesting. I've only recently sort of gotten into poetry a little bit. I used to think that was super gay. Hated poetry, but now I've started to appreciate it, and just all the different meanings, words, like the different ways they can be used. It's almost endless.
Yeah, and it is a bit outsourcing your brainstorming to the wisdom of the crowd. In some ways, is the way I look at it. It is not possible for me to think all the thoughts on a given subject that could be thought. But if you get a dozen people together, between all of them, probably they're going to cover a pretty good spectrum of all the different ways of looking at something. So the more critical sources, and critical in terms of critiquing rather than being critical of those people, between them all, they're gonna generate thoughts that I would never have thought of. They would read a passage that I'd read and go, okay, and then they go, wait a minute, but did you think of it this way? I would go, I did not. That's an interesting take on that line. I never thought of it that way. So this is all to say, it's not like you should avoid the source material and never read it. That's stupid. But more you're going to get a better understanding by maybe looking at a bunch of people who've read it before you and let them tell you what they thought, then go on to make up your own mind about it and put it into context and things like that. Now that you've heard that range of opinion on the subject. So that's kind of how I do it. Yeah.